What's good with everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Hoops podcast. I gotta be honest, I forget the name of this one, if it's 38 or 39, but it's one of those. And I'm joined here today with Hawks fan, Hawks coverer, Mikey. He knows basketball. We have known each other on Twitter for quite some time, and I'm happy to be doing this podcast with you because today we're talking about the Atlanta Hawks. That's right, we're talking about ATL, going through the inner workings of the roster, how 2023 went. There's a lot to talk about here, but I want you to quickly introduce yourself to the people. Mikey, you're in the building.
Yeah, so as Gift said, we've been talking on Twitter for a while now. My name is Mikey Kabrinsky. I write articles for the Hawks right now. I write articles for Hawks Fan TV on Twitter, if you've heard of that Hawks account, and as well, I'm writing for a Back Sports page covering the Hawks this year. And I was actually able to go to Media Day this year to ask questions to the players, the GM, and the coach for Back Sports page. So that opportunity was awesome, and looking forward to talking some Hawks basketball today.
Yes, and I just want to say, I'm so happy for Mikey because this man sits here and watch basketball. We would be in spaces arguing about rim pressure and defense, Capella. So seeing you in that position, I'm very happy to see you in. So that's dope. Make sure to go support him. All of his links will be in the comments and description below. So tap in for that. If you're new to this channel or this podcast, tap in, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. We also have this rolling out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so tap into the audio version. But let's get it all that out the way. I'm happy to be talking about Hawks basketball because there's a lot of questions and concerns that I have to voice to you. As an outsider, I'm going to bow down to your knowledge of Hawks basketball, but I want to first start this off with what I think is the most important thing to discuss when it comes down to the Hawks. Obviously, you guys made a big trade for Dejountae Murray, and I'm going to be honest. For me personally, I did not agree with the trade from this perspective. I thought that for the Hawks, they were trying to figure things out. Obviously, you're bringing him in to try to compete, which makes sense. But I feel like the unprotecteds that you guys traded for Dejountae, I just don't think he's that caliber of a player. By the numbers last year, the Hawks offense with Dejountae off, I think was slightly better with Trae Young. And I think that Trae Young had a down season, but I still think fundamentally Dejountae can be a piece that works because you saw this team really buy into having both of these ball handlers. I just feel like it wasn't given a fair shot with the coach utilizing the pieces, which, trust me, we'll get to that coach later on into this podcast. But you as a Hawks fan, what was your reaction when you found out that your team traded for Dejountae Murray?
So for me, well, obviously, it's been a long time since the Hawks, at least in my watching of them throughout my life, had made a trade for a guy that was just an all-star the year before, right? I mean, it was a big deal, definitely getting the type of player Dejountae had the reputation of, especially in San Antonio, being that lockdown defender, nationally renowned defender that he got a lot of attention for. And so from my first reaction was, that's insane. Getting another ball handler next to Trae is huge because referencing that Miami series last year, I'm sure we're going to get into that more in 2022. I think the front office figured out that when people are able to close the floor and get Trae out of the middle, and he had to force the ball to give to maybe Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, who's not here anymore. We didn't really have that second guy to make that quick decision, and the defense was able to get set. So I think that the front office made a quick move, and I was really in favor of that move at first. But as we saw at the beginning of the season, the Hawks really struggled on offense. There was a lot last year. There was a lot of figuring out to do with Trae and Dejountae, and with the coach, like you said, we'll talk later. It really probably wasn't the greatest match to start the season, as the Hawks really struggled out of the gate offensively.
Yeah, it was such a mind-boggling season for Atlanta, and I feel like there's so much to break down with it. For me, the most shocking thing to start the season to me was Trae. I want to give my opinion on Trae Young before we get into this conversation about how he played. Trae Young is a player that to me is either massively overrated or massively underrated. There is no fair analysis of Trae Young from what I've seen. People went from saying he's better than Steph Curry to Jalen Brunson is better than him. And it's like, okay, can we just like calm down and just give Trae his props in terms of how good he is? In my opinion, Trae Young is one of the best playmakers in the NBA. His passing at his size is very, very good. And to your point, the point of the Dejountae trade is to give him another guy that is talented enough to where when Trae is playing 4-on-3 basketball, he can catch the ball and make a quick read or attack a closeout. He didn't have many guys on the roster doing that. And Miami, because of that, was able to really key in on him defensively. So I think from that perspective, that makes sense. But the way Trae started out the year, it was bad. I think at one point he was shooting like a 43% true shooting for like a month stretch. And it didn't really make much sense because a lot of his looks were actually more open than ever before. He just wasn't knocking it down. And I'm not the type of person to use a one season sample size to say this is who Trae Young is, because we know Trae Young can be a much better shooter than that. Although for his career so far to start, he hasn't been the level of shooter that you would think he would be after college. He's still one of the best shooters in the NBA. Yep. What were your thoughts on how Trae began the season?
I agree with what you said about a lot of the looks he got. They're normally looks, for example, in the 2021 season, I was confident every time he shot the ball from three. I mean, he was knocking down most of his threes, it seemed like, every night. But in the beginning of the season, the floater wasn't falling, and Trae Young, that's his shot. I mean, if you're not looking for Trae to shoot 30-foot threes, the next shot is, okay, he's going in and shooting the floater, one of the best in the NBA. So even that wasn't going down. So it was really weird to start the season. And if you combo that with John Collins' shooting struggles for the majority of the year, he did pick it up in the second half after the All-Star break. But combo that with Collins' shooting struggles, Capella not really shooting a lot of threes. Dejountae actually was great from shooting from three when he got here, and it's including this year to the preseason so far. And with Dre not shooting a lot of high volume threes, this offense became very mid-range heavy. And when you have that in today's NBA, it doesn't really mesh with the type of offense that Trae wants to run, and especially with John Collins and Capella on the roster, you want to be up and down the court. That's two athletic bigs that love to run the floor. And McMillan didn't really want to do that. He wanted to get in the pick and roll, find some mismatches, settle in for that 7-foot mid-range shot. And that's why you see, if you look at the stats, DeAndre Hunter last year, he was a top 5 mid-range shooter in the league. Yeah, he had a great year in terms of his strength, but I'm not sure how much that related to winning basketball as an offense as a whole. So Trae, it was just kind of unexplainable for me for the shots that Trae was missing as a whole.
Yeah, it was crazy because Dejountae was playing out of his mind to start the year. I remember many Hawks fans at the time saying that he was outplaying Trae. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch as many Hawks games at the beginning. So I said, okay, that's weird. So I went back and watched it, and it's like, I'm seeing Dejountae shoot the three at a competent level, but more importantly, getting to his mid-range and knocking it down at a pretty efficient clip. But the speed and burst was the biggest thing. I mean, he showed the athleticism, especially in terms of attacking closeouts, pretty well. And he was playing productive basketball. I'm pretty sure he had some nights where he was putting up near triple doubles for the Hawks to start the season off. For sure. Yeah. The only problem that I had with the offense as it, dragged on under Nate is it felt like it was more Trae Young and Dejountae taking turns. And I'll give Trae credit, right? Yeah. Because to start the year, especially in preseason, I watched those games. Trae was trying to make it work. He was moving off the ball. He was trying to do X, Y, or Z. But it felt like the emphasis for that offensively wasn't really there. There were a ton of possessions where if Trae had the ball, you would have Dejountae in like the right or left corner. And the same would be flipped if Dejountae had the ball. It didn't feel like there were many actions involving them. And Trae, it still bothers me to this day. Knowing his shooting ability, the fact that he is not utilized enough off the ball bothers me, because he's one of the fastest guards in the league already. Yep. And he can easily trail a pin down screen to a quick floater, to a lob. He's one of the best guards in terms of when he gets that paint touch, that quick lob throw, or that quick floater, you don't know what's coming. He's that unpredictable when he gets deeper in that. So using him with I think Capella as an off-ball screener or even, some of your bigger bodies would make a lot of sense. And I just don't think we saw enough offensive creativity from this team in the first half.
Yeah. I mean, for the first 2 months of the season, I believe we were bottom 10 in offensive rating. And with a team that has Trae Young, Dejountae, Murray, you wouldn't expect that at all. And I love what you said about, not necessarily Trae coming off screens shooting like he's Steph. He doesn't have to shoot these catch and shoot threes to be effective off low. Like you said, even coming off trail screens, pin down screens, and curl screens, you're seeing him do that a lot, even in preseason. I think that's really the influence of Quinn Snyder's offense on this team, which I gotta say, it's preseason, but I'm loving watching this offense. It's night and day from last year to this year.
And this takes us to Nate McMillan, which I'll give him credit from this perspective, right? When you guys got rid of your last coach and you guys took on Nate mid-season and you made that run to get to the conference finals, I feel like Nate was instrumental in terms of giving them a newer voice. But to be honest, I felt like Nate just dragged on as a stale coach. The Miami series had a lot of head scratchers. It didn't feel like Trae felt the confidence from Nate as much. There was a report about the last game where Trae wasn't really involved with the huddle or whatever. It felt like Nate's voice just dragged on, and his rotations were at best questionable. He was more like a stable type of coach, but not trying to be creative offensively. Quinn Snyder is the opposite of that, and I'm here to say, as someone that watched a lot of Utah Jazz basketball, he was a offensive savant in terms of understanding spacing principles and getting guys to fit on the court exactly where they were. So I said coming in, once they get rid of Nate and they take on Quinn Snyder, I said it was going to take time because you can't expect him to be able to fully implement his system when he doesn't have all the guys on his coaching staff yet and only has half of the NBA season to work his principles in. But now that there's been a full off season to work both Trae and Dejountae, at least in preseason right now, they're killing. They're playing really good basketball. Yeah,
I love how you said it. He wasn't really able to implement the system, and that's something he actually confirmed at Media Day. He said a week ago that, obviously I was here for those last 21 games. He said from an analytical standpoint and an evaluation standpoint, those 21 games were valuable in the regular season, but he wasn't able to implement any of his system. He said they weren't doing anything Quinn ball related. So now when you get to staff, like you said, we're already seeing so much different things. And I want to preface this by saying Nate McMillan, if you look at his stats, all-time wins and everything, stats would say he's a good coach, right? He's got a lot of wins. Unfortunately, he hasn't had a lot of playoff success. But the main thing is you can't look at Nate McMillan at just as a whole and say, okay, he's a good coach. Why did he do well on this team? You got to look at his tendencies and stuff. And really, as a defensive coach with not a lot of defensive guys on the roster and guys that wanted to shoot threes but didn't have a lot of shooters on the roster, McMillan doesn't really mesh with those offensive goals. And he's not very creative offensively, hiding what kind of pick and roll actions you want to do. Not very great at doing some off-ball stuff. So with those combinations, I think ultimately led to McMillan's firing.
Yeah, and there's another player I want to bring up who I'll just be honest about flat out. John Collins was one of the most disappointing players I watched last year. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure he shot 28 to 30% on wide open threes.
Yeah.
And his defense left a lot to be desired. It is tough because Collins had many strong moments as a Hawk. I'll never forget John the Baptist when he baptized Joel Embiid in the playoffs. I remember this stuff, but it's it was such a disappointing season for him. And again, the spacing element of what you're saying matters because if Trae is playing with Capella, Collins, and Dejountae at the same time, it's who is the defense really respecting from three of those guys I just mentioned, especially if John is not really spacing the floor. Also, I feel bad for John Collins because while he was a great athletic player who fit Trae well, I feel like the writing was on the wall for him to be traded because his name has been in trade talks for many years now. So the fact that Yeah, and now it was weird because Utah just said, okay, we'll take him and we'll give you a pick. And it was like this random trade that happened 1-for-1, really under the radar. But I think for the Hawks, it's giving you a breath of fresh air. And same for John Collins, right? Like now he's in a completely different situation. So maybe he'll be a bit more productive. But now you're coming into a team that, you know, has a new head coach, a new training staff, and you're basically just working through things from the ground up. What do you think is going to be the biggest difference between last year and this year?
I think with Collins gone, honestly, the biggest difference is versatility in the front court. Collins, Hunter, and Capella all struggle pretty much having the ball in their hands, kind of getting by people or attacking a closeout. And when you've got guys now, what Jalen Johnson is doing in this preseason is special. There was a lot of talk about Hawks fans last year about saying, okay, you know, Jalen's gonna be this guy. He's gonna be like, people are calling him LeBron Light. I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. But this dude he's such a beast when it comes to scoring in the open court. Nobody's stopping him on a fast break. And his playmaking is exceptional from the forward position. But what I needed to see from Johnson was if he could translate that to the half court. And this preseason, he's doing that starting at the 4. And him and Okongwu at the 5. And Okongwu's, by the way, 3 from 6 from 3 in the preseason. He's letting it fly. And he's only played 2 games. So when you've got those guys, that versatility, the switchability, both those guys can switch onto guards. And when you have the versatility, that's the main thing that's going to help this offense and honestly defense with that switchability, like I mentioned, be better this year. One thing I wanted to add is Collins actually had the best year of his career defensively by far. He was a great help side defender. You know, the one-on-one defending last year was not the greatest. But as far as help side defense, he turned around an area that he drastically needed to improve into one of the league's best last year in help side defense. And that's what I want to say about Collins, because a lot of people will say he didn't improve anything since his rookie year. And obviously that 3-point shot, he didn't shoot his rookie year. But I think Collins, similar to how you said with Trae Young, in Atlanta, he was either underappreciated or just completely like say he's overappreciated. I don't think there were fans that really, a lot of fans that knew how to completely evaluate Collins.
Yeah, he was a very confusing player for me. And like, as someone that didn't watch a high amount of Hawks games beyond maybe 25, I feel like I would see nights where, okay, he provided some good help side. That was good. And then I would see some nights where, okay, he's gassed behind the play. He doesn't like make the proper rotation, or he's getting killed in the pick and roll. Like, I would see some moments like that with him. But all in all, it was a very turbulent up and down season for him. And honestly, for the Hawks, I mean, this is a team that had a lot of stats where they were just middle of the pack in. And it was weird because it's like 41-41. I think the offense was dead middle. I think the defense was dead middle.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
No, sure.
Well, what I was going to say was, if you dive a little bit into that 41-41, there's even weirder stats. So, well, the Hawks now hold the record for most days at, under, or above one game of 500 in NBA history, the most consecutive days spent.
That was weird.
Even if you dive deeper into that, the Hawks, we touched on this. The Hawks offense struggled early. We were definitely bottom 15, possibly bottom 10 in offensive rating. So, and we knew there might be some struggles with Trae and Dejountae learning, and Nate McMillan not being the best offensive coach. But as the season got on, we slowly got the offense better. In December/January, we went on a 5-6 game winning streak, and we're like, okay, this team may start to be looking at something. And then we get to January, and the defense just falls off the table. So we started the year, but the offense goes. We ended the year top 5 in offense, and after the All-Star break, we were second in offensive rating behind the Kings. I think some of that is just Trae shooting better, but some of that is maybe Quinn's voice. I mean, he wasn't able to implement his system, but we went from a top 10 defense to start the year. We started off 7-3. So that great to first 10 games. We went from a top 10 defense and a bottom 10 offense to start the year to, both middle of the pack. And then after the All-Star break, bottom 10 defense, we finished 22nd. to a top 3 offense after the All-Star break. So it was just a roller coaster of a year. We'll look at it, and we ended up being exactly 41-41.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to transition to another conversation before we get to the playoffs, obviously. For me, I've been saying this for years. Okongwu can be a special player. I feel like the rim protection and, again, the switchability, like, I think the idea, right? If you're building a team around Trae Young, which personally, I don't know if he can be a number 1 option on a title team, but if you are to do it, the passing is there to elevate guys, but you want to have as many switchable defenders that can space the floor around Trae. And I feel like Okongwu, long term, once he like grows into like his man frame more, should be the ideal 5. I was saying it 2 years ago. Capella fundamentally is a better rebounder and I think like an interior defender than Okongwu. But Okongwu is like the future of where the NBA is going, where like your 5-man can do everything. I can rebound, play paint, come out, like guards. That is what I've seen from Okongwu ever since his time. I think even in the Chino Hills days, if I'm getting that correctly, like with him, I see that there. And I think that this year might finally be the year where he's making that transition where maybe you bring Capella off the bench for certain matchups, because versatility is the key in the NBA. Obviously, we just saw Denver. They ran Jokic, Aaron Gordon, MPJ. Like the versatility of the different styles your 4/5-man can play matters significantly. And I think Okongwu fits directly in that direction as compared to Capella, who, even though he's a great roller for Trae, isn't that versatile as Okongwu can be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with most of that, honestly. And Capella versus Okongwu has been basically the talk of Hawks Twitter all summer. It's widely known that Capella, especially with the Dallas Mavericks, have been linked to, they're looking for that type of center. Exactly what Clint Capella is. And I want to preface this by saying, Capella, we are a better team objectively with Capella and Okongwu on the team. If we get rid of Capella, we lose depth. We'll probably have Bruno Fernando, who has improved since his rookie year with the Hawks, but he's not that backup that you want ideal for contention. Right. For Okongwu. So Capella's still a good player, but the thing about it is Okongwu's going into he's going to be free agent after next season. So you got to find out what you have in him. Are you going to pay a backup center $20 million with an extension? Because that's what I think he's worth. And exactly. I don't know. So I think the organization this year was saying, okay, we have Capella. He has 2 more years left on his deal. There are a ton of teams that could use him. Let's see what we can get for him. And I don't think they saw the amount of return value they wanted in this offseason for Capella. And I want to make this clear though. I don't hate Capella. If any Hawks fans are listening to this, I know the value that Capella can bring to this team. But from an organizational standpoint, the value that we could get back from a Capella trade and not lose that much if Okongwu starts, I think outweighs the benefit of having them both. Which is why I do agree with mostly saying Okongwu, he's shooting threes now. Like you said, the switchability, the only thing that he really has to work on, 2 major categories, consistent defensive rebounding, offensive rebounding, he's great. And then just staying out of foul trouble, because that's the main thing. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, because again, Capella, I think structurally has done this thing where you put the 4-man who's going to develop into a 5 at some point, but in the meantime, they need like a real sturdy 5 to hold him down. And in terms of rebound numbers, I mean, dude, Capella is still one of the best defensive rebounders in the NBA. 5, easy, every year. Yeah. Now, the thing is, on certain matchups, when you get into the playoffs, the versatility gets exposed, and you need that to survive and be able to win. And I'll say this, for this roster heading into the playoffs, I feel like a lot of people expected Boston to beat them, right? Like many people just said Boston has arguably the best roster in the league. They won all these games. They should beat the Hawks. I think that was the expectation. But the way things unfolded, I mean, you guys forced them 6 in a game where there was no Dejounte Murray, and Trae was carving up that defense in the final 3 games of the series. I really want to get your thoughts
on that, and also the emergence of DeAndre Hunter in that series as well.
Yeah, DeAndre Hunter. Play a quick note on him. He's had a really good playoff experience, performances the last 2 years. In Game 5 against the Heat, when in 2022, 2022. Obviously, it wasn't the greatest series as the Hawks for the whole, but he had a great series. DeLon Wright was actually the best player on the floor for the Hawks that year, and DeAndre Hunter was the close second. So that kind of says. But in this year's playoffs, DeAndre Hunter, a lot of teams will force him to shoot the three ball a lot. They know they like the mid range, but if they keep going under screens like the Heat and the Celtics have done in back-to-back years, he's shown the confidence and ability to want to take a lot of threes. And we need that from a guy. Every team needs that 3-and-D guy, that core one. And Hunter can be that guy. We know he's a great defender on wings, struggles a little bit against guards, and that's why Murray needs to handle that, especially with guards. But Hunter, he's performed well in the playoffs. But overall, Trae's had some trouble in the first 2 games, but I think Snyder with some adjustments, Trae just getting that confidence back after some of those demons he was facing from that Miami series. He was great, and pushing them to 6 games. A lot of people said it wasn't going to be even a series, sweep 5-game series. But when Trae hit that 3-point shot, that deep 3-pointer, and it was something special. And I'm glad we put up a fight. Obviously, it wasn't the season we wanted, ending 41-41, going up against the Celtics in the first round. And honestly, I wasn't in favor of this, but I'm not sure how many Hawks-Bucks games you've watched. But the way we play the Bucks.
No, it's different. It's different.
Yeah, it's different. We match up so well. Like, we have the Okongwu stopper. That Bucks Twitter has called Okongwu the Giannis stopper.
Yeah, right.
The Giannis stopper. So we match up really well against the Bucks. And unfortunately, the Celtics were a terrible matchup for us, and especially Capella. I love how you mentioned the versatility between Okongwu and Capella. Capella was virtually unplayable in that series just because when you had Al Horford on the floor, 5 elite shooters, and Capella doesn't like to be.
You have to play in space. It doesn't work compared to Okongwu, who can basically be switchable, contest in the paint, also get out faster with the foot speed and the mobility. Like, these things are different. And I love what you said, because a lot of people would kill Hawks fans about this, but it's true, because the Bucks are a slower type of team. And because of Brook Lopez, who's going to stay in the paint, you can create advantages with Trae's pull-up shooting, which can bend the floor, compared to the number of perimeter defenders. Because yes, they have Jrue Holiday, sure, but when Jrue dies on the screen sometimes, Trae can still eat up multiple advantages compared to having to deal with Derek White and Marcus Smart for the entire series, and then have Tatum and Brown as like bigger bodies who can also sometimes also do help side. You know what I'm saying? So I get your point on that for sure.
Yeah, that drop coverage that the Bucks play really plays into our hands, especially in a Nate McMillan offense. We don't know how we'll do against the Bucks with Quinn Snyder. Maybe it'll be different, but Nate McMillan, very mid-range heavy, likes to exploit matchups. The way DeAndre Hunter, Trae Young, Dejountae Murray, Okongwu shoots the mid-range. I mean, we were just every single time mid-range. It was going in every time because Brook Lopez was just dropping, and there'd be so much space.
Yeah. I want to go back to a name that we talked about briefly, but we didn't like expand on. Jalen Johnson, man. I remember Jalen Johnson coming over from Duke. I remember, like, is he a good teammate? All this other, stuff. And I thought, okay, with more development for the Hawks, I think Johnson can be like another tweener type that's just this bigger body who can like abuse mismatches here or there, but also shows spacing potential. How do you think he fits in this year for the Hawks?
I think he fits at the 4, honestly, this year. I think we need to see Jalen and Okongwu on the floor at the same time. Obviously, Quinn, Hawks Twitter doesn't know. We don't know if Quinn's gonna go Sadiq and Capella. In my opinion, that's the pair at the 4 and 5 if you're gonna go with them, or Jalen and Okongwu. Capella might start just because of politics, and in that case, you need to start Bay. But for Jalen, he's going to have a huge role this season. He's shooting the 3-ball finally with some confidence this preseason. Hopefully it lasts into the regular season. But the way this man is passing the ball in the half court, if you watch some of the passes last night that he threw, he had 7 assists in the first half. And the way that he was he's thrown at least 3 lobs to Okongwu, attacking closeouts, and when he's occupying space, the way he can play make in positions that you wouldn't normally see a forward make is special. I mean, when you're looking at like national recognition for Jalen Johnson, there isn't a lot of it. But we have guys like, Kenny Beecham kicking the fourth quarter. It seems like he never talks about the Hawks, but when he's tweeting Jalen Johnson's passing is special. I mean, there's types of things that people are going to realize Jalen Johnson can do this year that I don't think people that watch the Hawks a lot know about, and that's just the way he passes and the leap that the Hawks fans have been talking about overall this season. It's just the 3-ball. If he can knock down 1 3 a game, maybe take 3 shots. If he can shoot 33% on just taking 3 shots a game from 3, the leap is here. Jalen offense is just going to look even more dangerous, and the defense, he's a better perimeter defender than John Collins, and one-on-one, but hopefully that help side will kind of develop. That's one thing that we are going to miss that JC provided last year.
Yeah, I say this all the time, right? Like, shooting 40% is ideal, right? Because it's elite shooting. But if you're a big man, if you're hovering around 35%, that's perfectly fine, because it's a good enough percentage to where they're going to have to respect your spacing and you can knock down the shot. But more importantly, if you surround Trae Young with bigger, more athletic defenders who can also be lob threats, but also can space the floor. And beyond that, the most underrated part about all this too, right, is if you're putting them next to bigs who can pass, you unlock a different type of offense at that point. Because now it's like Trae can do the high pick and roll, but now he can move off screens. He can run more handoff plays with these bigs because they can pass. They can now be secondary playmakers out of the pick and roll. It just uncaps more offensive potential that you can run. And for me personally, the creativity is what I want to see a lot more of. I want to see Trae and Dejountae get creative with each other as well. I think that can unlock a lot of dynamics to your offense, especially when you're running with those jumbo size lineups who can switch basically 2 through 4.
Yeah, the biggest question when we got Dejountae was, can he shoot the ball? Honestly, catch and shoot threes. He increased his volume over 100 threes from the year before he went to the Hawks to the year he got here last year, and he's answered that question. He's like performed from the 3-point line better than I think I even expected. I mean, he was above 35%, and he shot, like you said, above 40% for like the first month and a half of the season from 3. So we know Dejountae has that spacing. That versatility between Trae and Dejountae and bigs who can pass is huge, because Snyder overall in this preseason so far has been running a lot of dribble handoffs. He'll disguise the pick and roll of what we're running really well, and I think that's the biggest difference from McMillan and Snyder. A lot of times, if you play the Hawks, opposing teams, they could have said, okay, we know the high pick and roll is coming. They might run a delay action before the pick and roll, but we know it's eventually coming. With Snyder, he hides the type of way we're going to run the pick and roll, or even we've been running a lot of 5 out this preseason too. He hides that so well, and I think that's what's going to give Jalen, Okongwu, Bay can even do a little bit of playmaking as far as that offensive end. So I think that gives those guys a lot of versatility, and Trae's moving off ball, not necessarily shooting catch and shoot threes, but coming off these screens, diving into the paint, and it's creating like 2 or 3 options to the kick out for 3. He can lay it up. He has the floater or the dump down around the big to dump the ball off to the center. So I think there's a lot of options that the Hawks are going to have on offense this year, and I'm excited to watch it.
I think the best thing that I've heard you say this whole podcast is breaking down the difference between what off-ball play really is, because many people just on paper think, oh, Trae, shooter, just run off ball and catch and shoot threes. Playing off ball is bigger than that. And as a Warriors fan, obviously, like, I can break down, Steph. Obviously, Steph is a threat to shoot the ball off the ball, which is why teams guard him that way. But oftentimes when he catches the ball, what he does off off the burst, attacking closeouts and creating secondary chances beyond just the shooting is what makes the offense so dangerous. And with Trae can do that as well, but he's a better passer in terms of lobs and like his creativity with that. So now if he's curling off a screen and going downhill, he can quickly dot the corner. He can quickly dot back the hash if the corner man rotates up after he cuts from the hash, right? Like these are things that Trae can do at a high level. And I think this is the part of the conversation where we can just have this conversation. People got to relax, okay? I'm seeing people say Jalen Brunson is better than Trae Young. I'm seeing people say that confidently. Yeah, right. Like I feel like Trae has been dealt such a bad hand because of how he underperformed last year in terms of his efficiency as a shooter. But are we forgetting that a season before this, Trae was one of the most efficient volume scorers in the NBA, right? Like Trae, I think, is primed to have a bounce back season. And I think with a coach that's maximizing the offense around him, Trae can look a lot better. Now, defensively, I don't think there's going to be much of a dramatic change outside of him buying in a bit more on the end. There's only so much he can do at that size, but that's why for me, if Trae is doubling down in his offensive fortitude, we're talking about a team that could potentially be a top 10 offense, if not higher, if everything maps out well for that team. Specifically for Trae, though, what do you think you're gonna see, and what are you expecting to see from him to right these conversations?
I think from Trae, we're gonna see less. We might even see less shots from Trae, less time with his hands, with the ball in his hands. Because with McMillan, it was a lot of, Trae, your turn, Dejountae, your turn to run the pick and roll. Let's switch it up. But it really teams knew overall the pick and roll is coming. So with Trae, you're seeing Jalen Johnson bring up the ball a lot. Obviously Dejountae can do it as well. But we're seeing 1 to 2, maybe 3 passes. And Bogdanovich maybe probably our best, most consistent shooter, running around screens. He'll get the ball, and then as he comes around the screen, the big will set the pick and roll pick for Trae when Trae's off ball, and Trae will cut to the basket and come around another. Like there's so many different things that Trae is doing this preseason that we've wanted to see from him from for a while. And I think we'll see Trae have the ball in his hands less. I think we'll see more efficiency because of that, and maybe cut down on the turnovers. But the one thing I don't want to see from Snyder and from this team as a whole is we're going to run a lot of 5 out and a lot of off-ball actions, obviously. But I don't want to go completely away from the pick and roll, because Trae is a generational playmaker in terms of the pick and roll. We can't just cut that out of our offense. So the way we get into the pick and roll, I think, is what Snyder's is great, is like you said, a basketball savant at. You hit hiding what actions we're running to get Trae in the best position to have so many options to score or play make. And that's what I think we're going to see from Trae this season.
That's another great point that you make, because I feel like people overcomplicate things, right? Like people think, oh, we now have to spend the entire game running Trae Young off the ball. But what's maximized the Hawks is when Trae has the ball in his hands. Normally when Trae has the ball in his hands, that is a top 10 offense, arguably like one of the better offenses of like the past 10 years when Trae has the ball in his hands. It's kind of crazy because what he's able to produce in the high pick and roll is really predicated on his speed, his burst, and his passing ability. Like how many times I've seen Trae fake a floater that's really a oop, or fake a shot and kick back to hash or 3. It has that potential, but the issue is when you spam pick and roll over and over and over, like you said, you get predictable. Teams know exactly what to expect, and your offense doesn't max out. What I want to see from the Hawks more this year is the ball movement, because when the ball is just swinging over and over and over and over and over, you're getting great quality looks. Jalen Johnson having 7 assists as a big is proof that the offense is moving around. When you have offense that just has ball movement, it's great. And I think you still do the pick and roll, obviously, because when it comes down to closing out games, sure, you might know it's coming, but that's our best play, so beat it, right? But having other things to go to for the full 48 minutes of the game matters in maximizing that to me.
Yeah. That's a great point. The other thing I think we'll see a lot of from the offense is shooting more threes. just as a whole. We know Snyder liked to run a lot of Spain pick and roll when he was in Utah, but a lot of those guys, you had Bogdanovich, you had Mitchell, and with Gobert, I can't remember how many times I've seen Donovan Mitchell and Bogdanovich shoot a three when they were with the Jazz. When Rudy Gobert set that screen and they run Spain pick and roll, it resulted in a three a ton of times. And Snyder has really emphasized in the preseason, we're going to shoot more threes. Hunter in his media day was like, Quinn has wanted me to shoot a lot of threes, and I asked him, how does he balance his mid-range game and his three-point shot? He said, Quinn knows my game. He's not going to take my three-point shot of my mid-range away from me. But all in all, I just got to be more confident, get more shots up in volume, and the three-pointers will come. So I think that's going to be a huge difference we'll see from the Hawks on offense. We're going to shoot a lot of threes. We've got up over 40, I think, in each preseason game this year. We haven't necessarily shot it well, but this year, Trae, Dejountae, Garrison Matthews, Patty Mills, Wesley Matthews, Kobe Buffkin's been a great shooter so far. Bogdanovich, AJ Griffin, Sadiq Bey. I just named nine
shooters.
Nine shooters. Of all above average shooters. If you count, Dejountae was it's sensational last year in terms of if you just want to look at that category of shooting. So that's just 9 above average 3-point shooters, and should be for Trae. 9 above average 3-point shooters that I just averaged. When we shot a lot of 3-pointers last year in the game, because that's how teams played us, we often lost because we just didn't have those shooters to do that. Now we do, and it's matching the player personnel, which I think is a huge thing for this year.
And see, that right there is what makes this next part of our conversation hard, right? Because the NBA is at a point where there's talent on every team. Obviously, the West is just bonkers. It's like 12 playoff teams in the West. Only 8 can make it. In the Eastern Conference, not so much, but I'm struggling to see what the landscape looks like, because I think the argument for the Hawks is we finished 41-41 last year. We had a new coaching hire midway. It was the first year we had Dejounte Murray, and it wasn't under the new head coach that we have now. And we traded for better shooters. Sadiq Bey, I'll never forget this. When you guys played the Miami Heat and it was the Kyle Lowry show, Sadiq Bey was bullying Bam in the paint, which was wild. I'm like, wow, how is this? Right? And like that Hawks team was looking crazy. And I'm like, damn, like they just blew the doors off the Heat in a must-win game for the Heat to try to make the playoffs. And now they might not make it, and they barely beat the Bulls. And funny enough, that team goes from the play-in to the finals. But like, that's what we're talking about. So now I'm looking at it like, okay, they lose John Collins, yes. The help side at times, yes, even though I personally believe he was still inconsistent in spots defensively beyond that. But I still think this roster as a whole should be better than last year. And it's like when you go through it, it's like, okay, the Celtics, the Bucks, the Cavs, the Hawks, people like I've been in arguments with people about the Hawks, the Magic, and the Pacers. Like these are 3 different teams. People bring up the Magic because of the length and the size and the new coaching and how competitive they were. But I feel like the Hawks are a team that they made the playoffs. And it was such a weird anomaly season. Like I feel like the Hawks are gonna be a playoff team this year. I do too. My expectations for the Hawks, I mean, you're gonna, if you look at the Eastern Conference, like you were saying, you got the Bucks and the Celtics. I mean, like, come on. Bucks and the Celtics 1-2. No matter how you could flip them, I don't care. 1-2. After that, you can maybe put Philly, but what's going to happen with Harden? What do they get back? Don't know.
You don't know. So then you look next. Okay, the Cavs. They introduced a problem in the offseason by getting Strus with the shooting, because they got exposed for that in the Knicks series.
Yep.
But after that, the Hawks and the Cavs, I think we're right there. The Heat, yes, the Heat made it to the finals last season, but in my opinion, they had the worst offseason that had anybody in the league. They lost Strus, they lost Vincent, they didn't get Dame, Kyle Lowry's older, Jimmy Butler in the regular season. Like, we don't know. So for me, I think the Hawks are right there in between 4 and 5.
Okay.
I think that's where we are. And at media day, there were 2 people that gave concrete expectations for this team. Obviously, the GM is going to say, I expect this team to give a lot of heart and that stuff, GM talk.
Yeah.
But Dejounte Murray said play-in is not an option. We need to be a top 4 seed this year. And Clint Capella said, if we want to get what we need to be a top 10 defensive team. Those were the two concrete expectations we got. So, my opinion, if we can be that top 10 defensive team, I think we are the 4 or 5 seed. Obviously, I think the 4 would be better with the home court advantage. But I think after Philly, because we don't know what's going on, I think the Hawks and the Cavs are going to be battling for that 4 and 5 seed this year. And then maybe you got the Knicks 6th. Because in my opinion, I know the Knicks had a good season last year, but if you look at the talent on paper on the rosters, the Hawks are more talented than the Knicks. They played better than the Hawks. They did last year. But I think that, Trae, Jalen Johnson, how he's done, Okongwu, what he's done in the preseason, we're seeing leaps from guys that people who are down on the Hawks in the fan base are even switching up saying, oh, wow, I didn't expect this. Right. So I think a lot of people are gonna see that Jalen, Okongwu, these young guys are coming. So I think we'll be 4 or 5 that range. When the season's over.
That's why I think this is such an interesting conversation for me, right? Because how I'm looking at it, right? So the Cavs last year were by the numbers, the net rating, like they were such a dominant regular season team, and they got exposed for it in the playoffs, sure. But I feel like a lot of that was because they'd never answered who's our 3, because our backcourt plays limited defense, if any at all. And then our front court makes up for it, but they're very limited offensive players, and they couldn't get a rebound to save their life because Mitchell Robinson was dogging them the entire series. Yeah. And Donovan Mitchell got outplayed by Jalen Brunson. Right. That's what happened. The Knicks specifically are a very interesting team because for whatever reason, they had like a top 5 offense from like January on, and it was literally Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle tough shot making, and they were just killing people in isolation, and their defense and their defense kept up. And then they added Dante, who as a Warriors fan, Dante was a good player for us. Sometimes he wasn't aggressive in terms of looking at the basket enough, but on the Knicks team, it just feels like they have the talent and the weapons to also be in the 4 to 5 conversation. I feel like with the Hawks, the thing is, on paper, offensively, this should be a better team than the Knicks and the Cavs. I think you can argue that, but the issue is defensively, where are they going to fall out? But, I think the Cavs for sure are a lot to be a better defensive team. Probably another top 3 defensive team again, but their offense, is the shooting going to be enough to bridge the gap? Are we seeing a jump from a Garland and Mitchell as a backcourt? I think you are, but I think it's open for conversation. I think it's between those 3 teams in terms of how that pans out. I just don't see any scenario where this Hawks team doesn't make the playoffs, considering they're going to be better than last year, and last year they were mid. Literally 41 and 41 is the definition of mid, right?
Yeah, and that's good because I've seen a lot. Obviously, I've seen a lot of fans saying, "Oh, objectively, John Collins is a better player than Jalen Johnson. Objectively, we lost him." But I don't think, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating on John Collins.
I'm hating on John Collins.
I loved what he did here. Even Landry Fields said at media day he had nothing but praise for John Collins. An important part of his move of what we've done the past 6 years, starting power forward, but. Jalen Johnson, the versatility he provides, the switchability he provides, and once he gets that 3 ball down, if he's showing the confidence to take it, I think he becomes a better player than John Collins with that. That's the only thing. And I don't think a lot of people have seen what he can do, the role he's going to have. And I know a lot of people know Okongwu, but I don't think they know how well he's been shooting the 3 recently. So if he can stretch the floor with Trae,
it's a game changer.
We can surround 5 shooters with Trae if Okongwu, Bey, AJ Griffin, Dejountae, and Trae are on the floor. And what happened?
And it's not just 5 shooters, by the way. The defense with the shooting.
Yes, Okongwu and Johnson and Dejountae. But what happened the last time we surrounded a ton of shooters with Trae? We made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Kevin Huerter, Danilo Gallinari, Bogdanovic. Lou Williams was playing significant minutes in 2021 for us. So I'm not going to say we're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I'm just saying, and we have veterans like Wesley Matthews now, Garrison Matthews, obviously here, Patty Mills. We've got guys with championship experience on our team now. We didn't have any of that last year. I think that's a big part. So we're slowly coming into these organizational tendencies where it's good. It's going in the up compared to last year when there was a lot of toxicity in the organization, a lot of dysfunction. I think between the front office and the guys on the court.
So you brought up toxicity, and since we've gone over 2024 expectations, I have to ask you this question as a long-term question for the Hawks, because it was a question that was in the media from last year. Is Trae Young the guy for this Hawks team in the next 4 to 5 years, or do you think he gets traded from the Atlanta Hawks? Because last year there were talks about they might try to shop Trae Young, this and that. We know how good he is. Me personally, I think he's good, but I think if he's to win as a number one option, the roster construction has to be a good blend around him, and I think it's easier to like ship him off as a number two. But I got to get your perspective on it as a person that watches these games, understanding what Trae does at the elite level and what he doesn't do so well. What are your thoughts on that?
So for me, I think Trae has a chance to do what a lot of players don't have the opportunity to do. He has the opportunity to become the best player of this franchise in Atlanta. You have, with the St. Louis Hawks, Bob Pettit, Lou Hudson, Hall of Famers. I'm not going to discredit those guys, but in Atlanta, and the Dominique's obviously a Hall of Famer too, but he didn't have a chip here. And I think Trae has the opportunity, if we can win a chip here, to be the best player this franchise has ever seen in Atlanta. So that makes me think that the organization wants to try to win a championship with Trae Young as a number one. I think. And the Dejountae move, the way we moved about that so quickly, some people say too quickly, which there's an argument from both sides. I'm not going to die on a hill saying the Dejountae move was terrible or the Dejountae move was a godsend. I'm not going to say that because there's definitely an argument for both sides. But I think the organization will try and win a championship with Trae as a number one option. Now, can they do it? It's a different story. The roster building last year from this year, it's night and day. I see a lot of progression coming from this year. And I expect the team to be better. I'm expecting close to 50 wins, probably 49, 50 wins is what I'm going to say. Just because the way Quinn Snyder has his team playing right now, the defense in the preseason has actually been insane.
It's been legit. Yeah.
It's preseason. So are the guys going to play with the effort in the regular season? You'd think that would translate from preseason to regular season on the defensive end because defense is mostly effort. We know it's mostly effort. So hopefully that translates, but if it does, I think the organization's not going to trade Trae, and if they do, the haul that we get for him would have to be just so incredible because I don't think it's very easy to draft a talent like Trae. Sean from with the W always says like, the Hawks, we did the toughest job finding a number one or number two, depending on what we look at. We found it in the draft. Now it's the roster construction. So I don't think the organization wants to take a step back from that, saying, "Oh, we got to find another generational talent in the pick and roll that Trae is to build around." So that's why. And Atlanta, I gotta say, this is not the biggest free agent destination. So when you have a guy like Trae, I think you need to do everything in your power to try to keep him here to win with him. Whether that ultimately is when he's a number two or number one.
Yeah, I think the way that Atlanta is going about it with Trae Young, I understand because it's so easy on paper to say Trae should go. Okay, well then, if you don't find another player his caliber, then you're stuck being like a pretty bad team. And you're not winning, and then you're trying to draft another talent and make that work somehow. And maybe there's an argument that with the talent that could be coming up in 28 and 29, maybe, but with currently the roster you have, getting a new head coach, I hope that even if they don't see success, they try to commit to the vision with their head coach because Trae can't keep going through coach after coach after coach after coach. To be a good team, you have to lose, but you also have to understand continuity. And it feels like this year, on paper, the Hawks didn't do anything too crazy, and that's important because you can't make these trades where you give up 3 unprotecteds and you get back Dejounte Murray, but you don't try to commit to making the roster construction work for the next 3 years. You got to commit to a build, stick with it, and if it doesn't work out, at least you've exhausted all of your means to try to make it work.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Murray trade. There are a lot of fans who, and some in the Hawks fan base that ultimately think Trae and Dejounte won't work. Like we won't win a championship with Trae and Dejounte on this team. But I think those fans have to realize, and I think the whole NBA fan base has to realize the way Dejounte extended the way that he signed that extension of 4 years, 120. I mean, that was honestly the best thing that's happened for us this offseason, because you mentioned the 3 unprotected. That is a lot to give up. And if he would have walked, I mean, the organization would be in a bad way.
It would have been bad, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but the way he signed that extension, he could have easily got probably close to $40 million a year if he got it in unrestricted free agency. And when he signed that extension, no matter how you look at Dejounte, even if you don't like him as a Hawks fan or you do, that contract, that extension he signed is just so good for flexibility for the organization. Right. Shows loyalty, shows he wants to be here. And a lot of people were saying, you know, Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks ultimately reported that, you know, talks are leaning towards he's going to go into free agency. They're not close on an extension when they first got here. Mm-hmm. And when he signed that extension, obviously he had a change of heart, but there was that was such a huge thing for this organization to know. Okay, we have a solid foundation with Trae and Dejounte. Now we can focus on Okongwu and Bey, who are set to be free agents, and then kind of building around this young core that we have: Jalen, Okongwu, Bey, AJ Griffin, Kobe Buffkins look good this preseason so far.
I like Buffkin a lot, yeah.
So I think that Dejounte extension, I don't think it could be overstated. I think it was just huge for this organization.
I think this is a good point, because regardless if you're high on him or not, what we objectively know is the cap is going up pretty much by 10% every year. A contract where you're making 120 might sound bad, but that's really 30, 60, 90, 120. And then when you're looking at it, it's like, you know, it's not as bad, considering when the cap goes up, players making 30 million is going to be like the new 25 or the new 20, right? Like it's not going to be as dramatic. And the point is, if you're going to trade 3 unprotected picks for a asset, you have to at the very least keep the asset and try to make it work. I'm so sick and tired of teams trading 3 unprotecteds. Oh, it didn't work after the first year. Trade everybody. No, you have to commit to the vision that you did when you traded those picks, because that is the bed that you laid for yourself, right? You got a line, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's like I said at the beginning of the show, it's been a while since the Hawks have made a trade of that caliber to get an all-star the previous year. So especially when you do that and when you get 2-star players, you know, the league has the Hawks down as having 2-star players, you know, by that rest policy. We have 2-star players. So if you look at it objectively like that, you know, you've got to find a way to keep those guys there, because as a free agent destination, we haven't been able to sign a lot of those stars. And when you find a talent like Trae through the draft, you need to be able to keep that core and see what they can do. Especially, I think the number one reason is under this new Quinn Snyder regime.
Yeah. The last question I want to ask you is on Dejounte Murray from this perspective, right? So initially, when I made my video on the Hawks trading forum, I was highlighting the pros and the cons, right? And one pro that I said was, okay, Trae finally has someone who can man the offense when Trae isn't on the court. And contrary to popular belief, I believe the numbers when Trae Young was off the floor for Dejounte and weren't that great last season. What do you think Dejounte can do this year to make their potential stagger better this year?
That's a great question. Yeah, the offense was still good when Dejounte was on the floor, but it wasn't at its maximum. I mean, it was night and day when Trae was off the floor or on the floor as far as the offense goes. But for Dejounte, I think the biggest thing, you know, we run a lot of pick and roll, obviously, but both of them run the pick and roll so differently. Trae, it goes around the screen and he has a burst. He doesn't really, you know, he'll burst through the screen, but sometimes he'll stay near the 3-4-9 extended area, you know, trying to get the defender on his back. He'll get that foul call, obviously, like a lot of people know. But Dejounte a lot of times likes to survey right as he gets around the screen. I think the biggest thing for Dejounte is getting attacking that basket. Last year he settled a lot for mid-rangers, and that might be Nate McMillan, you know, wanting to take a lot of those. But I think a lot of criticism from last year was that Dejounte didn't get to the basket enough. We didn't put enough pressure on the rim outside of Trae. And Dejounte's been doing that this preseason. So I think the biggest thing that Dejounte can do to kind of maintain, obviously it won't be at the same level that Trae is, because Trae is miles ahead of Dejounte just offensively. But the biggest thing he can do is just put more pressure on the rim, because we now have, like I said, those 9 shooters to spread around the floor. The more pressure he can put on the rim, the more 3-point shots we're going to look, the more Quinn Snyder's going to like that. And Dejounte can get to the foul line more where he's a good free throw shooter. So I think the biggest thing for him is just getting to the basket more and being more aggressive on those screens, because he's a lot of times in this preseason, even he comes around the screen, and if he's running the side pick and roll with a guy in the strong side corner, he'll take a wide dribble, and then he'll kind of try to split the double team, but he'll turn the ball over. And if he takes that burst of speed right when he gets around the screen, that help can't make a decision. Do I show? Do I help in? Do I just leave him? And I think that's the biggest thing for Dejounte. So bursting off that screen, getting to the basket with more downhill action is what I want to see from him in 2024.
Hey, great answer, Mikey. I feel like I needed to ask that because that was something I always had a question about when they made the trade and also midseason. Again, I will be watching more Hawks basketball this year. For me, I'm going like hard this year. Obviously on the content side, but I'm literally creating a spreadsheet. I'm telling every podcast guest, honestly, the people who make it this far are probably tired of me saying this, but I want to speak it into existence. I'm creating a spreadsheet where I'm going to manually track how many games I watch of every team in the league. Okay. So when I'm inside of a Twitter space and they say, Gifted, how many games of this team did you watch? I'm going to say, hang on, pull up the spreadsheet. I'm going to look at the number. I'm going to say I watched 30 on the dot. That, to be honest, because I tried to watch like 4 to 5 games at a time, and that such a bogus.
Analyze the game. You can't just can't do it.
No, I just can't. So now I'm literally like, I'm going to watch 1 to 2 games at the same time. I'm going to like start to take notes on things at certain times in the season. Obviously, teams are going to go on like hot streaks and cold streaks, clearly. But I'm definitely going to be committing to watching more Hawks basketball. For me personally, I think Trae Young is out to have a revenge season because a lot of people are really playing with his name in terms of like how good of a player that he is. Even though I'm not super high on Trae Young in comparison to some other guards, I still think he's a very elite talent. He's one of the best passers that I've ever seen. And I think that the respect on his name in terms of his play and all that should be restored for this season. So I'm excited to watch Hawks basketball, man.
Yeah, I hope that's the case because, not making the USA team, not making the All-Star team last year.
That's what I'm saying. He had a rough.
And the Miami series. I mean, lately, just the way the national media has viewed Trae has just been very down. I mean, people are quick to forget. This is a guy who averaged 31-9 in his first playoff run. And in his third year in the league. 31-9. Against good defensive teams in the Knicks that year. The 76ers who put Ben Simmons on him. And the Bucks who had Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
So we know Trae can do it on the big stage. We've seen it, but can we get there again? Because, like I said, it's not great getting some play in and not having home court advantage. But this roster feels like, and with Trae's attitude, what he said over the course of this summer at media day, he's been very championship focused. Somebody asked him in media day, he was like, what do you got to do to get you back on that All-Star team this year? He's like, ultimately, man, that's not my goal. I mean, we're here to win a championship. And he's like playing with a chip on his shoulder this year. He's just that. So there's a lot of talk about Trae Young, and hopefully he'll answer to it because the Hawks this year feel like we've got to move. We've got to take a step in the right direction. Otherwise, next year we could see some big changes because three years of playing with a guy like Trae Young, that's how you start to lose faith when you start in your star player, or that's how your star player starts to lose faith in your organization with 3 playing.
Yeah. Well, hey, great analysis from Mikey again. I'm happy that we actually sat down. I don't think we ever sat down for this long specifically.
No, it's never been this long. Yeah.
Dope. Well,
yeah,
I'm
awesome.
happy. I'm happy for that. I definitely want to get you back on here at some point during the season to evaluate how the Hawks are playing. I appreciate your knowledge and all that. Again, hopefully I did a good enough job because, again, I haven't watched that many Hawks games, but I like to be honest about it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to try to correct that more in this upcoming season. But Mikey, I appreciate you. Please let the people know everything you do and where they can find you.
Yeah, so on Twitter you can find me. I mean, you search my name, Mikey Kubrinsky, but my Twitter handle is @PinWizard300. So you can follow me there on Twitter. Like I said in the beginning of the show, Hawks Fan TV, I do recaps for them for the games, and as well as writing for Back Sports Page, which is a feature article website where I'm going to be writing articles, maybe 3 or 4 a month on how the Hawks are doing, some tendencies. Just not individual recaps, but just some overarching angles that I'll try and write throughout the season. Also, I'm the host of Georgia Sports Nation, a Hawk podcast where we talk about the Hawks. We talk about the Braves as well. But so if you're into any Hawks and Braves, make sure to follow Recapping Hawks Hoops on YouTube. Subscribe to it. That's where the podcast is shown. But appreciate you, Gifted. It's always great to talk hoops with you for sure. Looking forward to the season.
Absolutely, man. I have all of his links in the description and comment section below. Let me know what you guys think of the 2024 Atlanta Hawks and what your thoughts are. If you made it this far, appreciate y'all. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, all things of that nature. And also 5-star us on the audio platforms. We got 3 5-star ratings. Let's get it to 4. That would be phenomenal for me. I like that. But appreciate you guys. The NBA season starts very, very soon. I think by the time this comes out, it might be like 6 or 7 or 5 more days left. I'm not sure when. I literally did 3 podcasts in a row today in one session, which is crazy. But we're here on the grind. Happy to see basketball is back finally, Mikey, as always. But have a good one, people. I'll catch you guys in the next episode of Get the Hoops. Peace out, people.
Peace.